Welcome back to the show. Today's episode features a 30-minute discussion between the two of us. Baha, myself, a product and experience designer who has spent years turning complex, ambiguous requirements into clear, human-centered solutions. And Donnafay, she's a retail technology and operations expert, and she's deeply familiar with the realities of store floors, planning teams, supply chains, and legacy systems.
Thanks, Baha. And our focus today is something that sits at the heart of good discovery work, the role of coaching in gathering requirements. Over time, we've both noticed that most valuable insights don't come from structured templates or formal interviews. They really come from conversations where people feel supported enough to pause and reflect and articulate what they really need.
Exactly. And what begins as a simple request like, we need a dashboard or can you shorten this workflow, often reveals deeper challenges related to decision making, alignment, confidence, or how teams share information. Bringing a coaching mindset into discovery helps uncover those root issues, not just the surface level symptoms. If you've ever had a discovery session that felt more like a coaching conversation than an interview, you'll understand why and how to use that dynamic intentionally. So let's get started. DFM, that's how we call Donnafay, DFM. I've been thinking a lot about how much my interviews over the past few years have ended up feeling like coaching sessions. At first, I didn't label it that way. I thought I was just collecting requirements. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized that what I was actually doing was helping people think. I wasn't documenting their needs. I was coaching them into clarity about what those needs truly were.
Oh, and I completely resonate with that. When I first started implementing retail planning tools and software, I approached everything like a technical project. Gather requirements, configure the system, train the users. But then after a while, I realized the real work wasn't in the buttons or the screens. It was in helping merchandisers and planners see their work differently. And this is where coaching became this quiet, I would say almost invisible part of the job. I was guiding them to articulate what wasn't working and help them articulate what success would feel like for them. And sometimes even when they were afraid to say what it was out loud.
Exactly. Like when I sit down with users early in a design cycle, they usually start with surface level requests like, we want a dashboard, or can you make this workflow shorter? Or can we have a button that does X? Those are fine entry points, but they're rarely the real story. And when I intentionally shift into a coaching mindset, which means slowing down, listening deeply, asking one thoughtful question at a time, it transforms the conversation. Suddenly, we're not talking about UI anymore. We're talking about friction, decision making, confidence, accountability, ambiguity, the human layers under the feature requests.
Yep. And the thing is, people who've been doing their jobs for 10, 20 years, sometimes their whole careers, they rarely are asked to step back and analyze the patterns that shape their day. So when I ask something simple like, what's the hardest part about planning next season? The response is almost never about software. It's usually about gaps they're experiencing, the bottlenecks, stories behind spreadsheets. And those stories don't show up in typical project meetings.
Totally. And curiosity opens things up in a way that process charts and requirement templates just can't. When you focus on the person rather than the process, you start hearing context that's completely invisible on paper. emotional load, organizational politics, quiet anxieties, informal workarounds, tribal knowledge. Coaching creates a safe place or safe space where all of that becomes visible. And once it's visible, it becomes design material.
It's funny because I used to think the better I got at systems, the less I'd need to do this. And it turns out the opposite's true. The better the system, the more human the conversation becomes. And coaching is almost like a bridge, helping people cross from, I think I need this feature, to here's what I'm actually trying to solve. So let's dig into the techniques for a moment because I think people underestimate how intentional coaching can be. For me, everything really starts with active listening. I'll mirror a statement back to confirm I'm truly understanding not just the words, but also the meaning behind the words. Like something like, so it sounds like the challenge isn't entering the data, it's aligning on what data to trust. And it's amazing how much that one reflection can unlock. What looked like a technical issue suddenly becomes a conversation about alignment, ownership, or governance.
Yeah, and reflection is huge. In my sessions, I often lean on the five whys, not in a mechanical way, more like a guided curiosity. If someone says we need better notifications, I'll ask, why is that important? And then behind that, why is it hard to notice things right now? And then what happens when you miss something? By the time we get to the fourth or fifth why, we're no longer talking about notifications. We're talking about workload, confidence, attention management, fear of missing something, the real emotional or operational trigger behind the request.
Right. And in retail, especially, those deeper issues often come back to culture. A planner will say they want a faster workflow. But when you explore it, you realize what they actually want is consistency and predictability or less last minute chaos. So the system can only solve so much. And then the culture, the communication patterns, the decision authority, those things are creating the friction and not the system itself.
Exactly. And when you start seeing those deeper patterns, you make much stronger decisions. You stop designing for the symptoms and start designing for the conditions underneath them. Another one I use intentionally is silence. It sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. After posing a question, I don't rush to fill the space because most people are trained to just fill silence. But in coaching, that silence becomes thinking time. It lets people reflect out loud. And that's when real insights really pour out, the ones that aren't rehearsed.
I agree. Silence is such an underrated tool. I use it especially when I sense someone is close to saying something they haven't articulated before. And if I jump in too fast, it disrupts the moment. So I wait, and they usually get there on their own. And the insights come from within rather than from someone prompting them. So people trust those insights a lot more. I also like something I call future anchoring questions. So that it would sound something like, imagine it's 6 months after launch. What does success look for you? Or another question could be, if the system made your job easier in one specific way, what would that be? Because these questions really push people out of a reactive mindset of fix this pain right now into more aspirational frame, which I would call what's the art of the possible.
That's really good. I mean, it's similar to visualization techniques in coaching. It pulls people out of the constraints of the present and into possibility. And when they describe that future state, they reveal what they value most, like speed, clarity, autonomy, coordination, accuracy. Those become the principles that guide my design decisions.
Right. And the other thing is tone matters too, because coaching isn't an interrogation, it's an invitation. And I've learned that I have to intentionally create safety. And I'll say things like, there's no wrong answers, or you can think out loud if that's easier. And it really lowers the emotional stakes. And people stop filtering, they start exploring. And this is where you get some of the friction that's actually happening. People will start talking about it.
Yes, and I also pay close attention to the language people use. So, for example, if someone says we always have to redo this, or no one ever gives us the right information, those absolutes, the always, never, they signal places where people feel stuck or powerless. And one of my go-to coaching questions is what might need to change for that to be different. And it gently introduces possibility without implying that they're wrong or they don't know what they're doing.
Right. So language really is a map to someone's mental model. And when you start hearing patterns in their language, you start hearing the constraints they're operating within. Some of them real, some of them assumed. So reality, perception is reality. Coaching helps dissolve the assumed ones, and then the real ones can then be addressed.
Exactly. And honestly, half of design and implementation is helping people loosen the constraints they've grown used to. And coaching reveals which constraints are structural and which are internalized.
Right. And when I first started using coaching tools, I didn't think of them as part of implementation work. They felt like something separate, like a soft skill that was nice to have. But now, as I've used them, I see them as foundational because the best outcomes for me have happened when people feel ownership over their insights that we uncover together. And when the understanding comes from them, even if I guided the process, it really sticks.
Yeah. I mean, I used to think discovery meant extracting insights from people. Now it feels like facilitating self discovery. I'm helping users articulate things they've intuitively known, but never really had the chance to frame them clearly. And that shift from transactional, if you will, to transformational conversation has completely changed how I design. So discovery is no longer a checklist. It's really a shared, meaning making process.
And the funny thing is, it doesn't actually slow the projects down. So people assume coaching takes longer, but the quality of alignment you get early on saves so much time later. And for me, it's reduced work, rework, and it clarifies decisions and really avoids misinterpretations. I've had projects where we spent more time up front and ended up finishing weeks earlier because everyone is going in the same direction. Everyone feels heard and part of the project.
Yeah, and the efficiency there comes from the clarity. When the users feel they are seen and understood, they're more engaged, they're more invested, and they're more willing to collaborate. They I think they have a more sense of ownership even. And that trust carries through testing, feedback, rollout. It prevents so many downstream breakdowns that happen when people feel their needs weren't heard at the beginning. And it gives them the ability to really guide the project, knowing that they have been there throughout the whole process as collaborators, not as some receivers of information.
I couldn't agree more. And if I had to summarize for me, my biggest takeaway, it would be like strong implementation questions are fundamentally strong coaching questions. And the basis of them is they're curiosity driven and they're non-judgmental and they are empowering because they're not pushing people towards an answer. You're, like you just said, you're bringing people into the project and they're feeling part of it, and they really help people discover their own truth about the work.
Right. And for me, the big insight that in any discovery, design discovery, implementation discovery, workflow discovery, the people are the source of the insight. So coaching isn't just a technique, it's a mindset. It's a way of believing that the user already holds the wisdom and you're just helping surface, helping surface it one thoughtful question at a time. You're really trying to encourage the users to share the knowledge they have, not just share it, but be proud in being able to help the project move forward through that knowledge. And again, it goes back to that sense of ownership that as they share this information and knowledge, they feel even more invested in the work, in the project, in the design, and again, it is more of a collaboration than just they're receiving a solution. They're actually participating in the creation of the solution.
And that's beautifully put, because the magic moment for me is when someone surprises themselves and they say, I've never thought about it like that before, or that explains why this is happening. And that shift in awareness is where better design and better implementation truly begins.
Absolutely. And those moments become the anchors for the whole project. When someone has that realization, you can always come back to it when decisions get messy. It becomes the North Star. And again, there's always going to be in a project, there are always going to be challenges, there are always going to be gaps or issues that were uncovered down the line. But again, when you cultivate that sense of ownership through this coaching experience, then there is an ownership even not just of the successes, but also, I would say, not the failures, but the gaps that could come up, and then a true team effort to try to resolve them and keep the project moving forward.
Right. And in a way, my last final thoughts is coaching isn't just something we use, it's something we model. And once teams see what it feels like, they can start doing it themselves with each other. And that's when transformation really takes hold. And it outlives the project itself, and it can have an impact on the organization as well.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, that's what makes this work meaningful. It's not just a solution we implement, it's the conversations that change how people see their work. And it's showing people that their value is more than just simply, doing their daily work. Their value is actually in the knowledge that they have, and sometimes knowledge that maybe no other people that they are in their team have. So they could have unique knowledge that they're sharing. And again, this is where this really makes this process so much more meaningful and so much more critical to the success of a project. And that's our show, our episode for today. If you have any thoughts or feedback, please feel free to leave a comment. Let us know what you think, like or dislike. Feedback is always appreciated. And stay tuned here for more interesting topics on technology, AI, coaching, and everything in between. So, thank you for listening.
And stay curious.